Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. No wars, no dynasties imploding under the weight of inbreeding, no royal mistress scandals, at least not yet. Instead, we're going to talk about something that every single person in history has done, something that you, right now, are probably about to do, or maybe you're already halfway there. Sleep. That's right, tonight's topic is not kings or queens or questionable marriages between cousins, but the long, slow, slightly bizarre history of human sleep, because, surprisingly, people haven't always thought about sleep the way we do now. And honestly, the story of sleep is kind of like the story of monarchy. It's full of rituals, weird traditions, and the occasional doctor standing by with a jug of wine claiming he knows what's best for your health. So, dim the lights, tuck yourself in, and maybe keep one ear open for this ramble through the ages of slumber.
Let's start way back. Prehistoric sleep. Now, obviously, we don't have caveman diaries to reference here. No one left behind an ancient Dear Journal. Today, I went to bed at 9 p.m. after eating a suspiciously undercooked mammoth steak. But anthropologists have pieced together some ideas based on modern hunter-gatherer groups. And here's the thing. Prehistoric humans didn't actually sleep all that differently from us, which is kind of reassuring, because you'd think with no blackout curtains, no white noise machines, and definitely no melatonin gummies, they would have been tossing and turning like crazy. But apparently, they were fine. They usually slept in a chunk of about 6 or 7 hours at night, with occasional naps during the day. Pretty relatable, honestly. Except, it wasn't the 8-hour solid block that modern culture likes to glorify. That whole, you must get 8 hours, or you're a zombie thing? Yeah, that's a relatively new obsession. For much of history, people thought of sleep as something flexible, something you could break up, something you could shape around the rhythm of firelight, moonlight, and the occasional neighbor making way too much noise in the next hut. Fast forward to ancient civilizations, where things start to get a little more ceremonial. Let's take the Egyptians. Of course, the Egyptians had to make sleep sound like a sacred mystical practice, because this is the same culture that made a whole science out of weighing your heart against a feather after death. For them, sleep wasn't just about rest. It was about the soul taking a little field trip. They believed dreams were a portal to the divine, which sounds poetic, until you imagine an ancient Egyptian priest waking up cranky and trying to convince everyone that his dream about falling into a pit of scorpions was definitely a message from the gods. And then you've got the Greeks. The Greeks, as usual, intellectualized the whole thing. They gave us the word hypnos for sleep, which sounds serene. But then they also gave us Nyx, goddess of night, and Thanatos, god of death, who was Hypnos's twin brother. So, yes. In Greek mythology, sleep and death were literally siblings. That's comforting, right? Every time you closed your eyes, you were basically playing a light-hearted game of, let's see if I wake up. Romans, on the other hand, being Romans, made sleep into something practical. They were very into the idea of dividing the night into watches, chunks of time measured by when guards swapped shifts. This meant the whole culture thought about night in 4 neat slices, which is pretty organized, but also deeply Roman. Sure, it's dark and mysterious, but let's make a schedule and give everyone homework. Now, medieval Europe. This is where sleep gets really weird, and kind of cozy, actually. Historians have found that in the Middle Ages, people commonly slept in 2 shifts. It's called segmented sleep. Basically, you'd go to bed not long after sunset. You'd sleep for about 4 hours. Then you'd wake up in the middle of the night, between what they called first sleep and second sleep. What did people do in that midnight intermission? Oh, all sorts of things. Some prayed, some read, if they were lucky enough to be literate. Some, well, to put it delicately, used the time for marital activities, because apparently nothing says romance like groggily waking up at 1 a.m. by candlelight. After an hour or two, they'd go back to bed for their second round of sleep, waking up again at dawn. And honestly, it sounds pretty healthy. a built-in midnight break. You could check your crops, have a snack, gossip with your family, and then head back under the blankets. Like a medieval version of scrolling Instagram at 2 a.m., except with more farm animals. This pattern of segmented sleep was totally normal for centuries. And then, slowly, it disappeared. Why? Well, we'll get to that. Spoiler. As usual, the Industrial Revolution ruins everything. But before we rush ahead, let's hang around medieval bedrooms a little longer, because they were different. For one thing, beds were not private. If you were traveling, staying at an inn, or even just hosting distant relatives, you might end up sharing a bed with strangers. Perfect strangers. No introductions, just here's a space, climb in, don't steal the covers. It wasn't considered scandalous. It was just practical. Beds were expensive, fireplaces were few, and heat was precious. The more bodies in a bed, the warmer everyone stayed. So the next time you complain about your partner hogging the blanket, imagine squeezing in with 3 random merchants on their way to market. Also, fun fact, medieval beds were often smaller and shorter than ours. People sometimes slept sitting up, propped against pillows or wooden backrests. This wasn't because they were short. It was because lying flat was associated with death. Again, thanks for the comforting imagery. History. You weren't just sleeping. You were rehearsing for the grave. Now, let's drift into the Renaissance. Here, as usual, wealth changed everything. If you were rich, you got to treat your bed like a throne. Literally. Beds were enormous, expensive, and decorated with curtains, embroidery, and enough carved wood to build a small ship. They were status symbols. Owning a big, elaborate bed was like posting an Instagram story of your vacation in the Maldives. It screamed, "I have money." Look at how fancy, even my unconscious hours, our people even received guests in their bedrooms. Imagine being summoned to a nobleman's chamber, where he's lounging in bed, surrounded by velvet curtains, while you're expected to have a serious political conversation. Very professional. For the poor, of course, it was business as usual. Crowded mattresses, stuffed with straw, maybe a blanket, if you were lucky. Honestly, the contrast between classes was as sharp in sleep as in anything else. The rich dreamt under canopies, the poor snored in hay. Some things never change. Let's pause here, because I know what you're thinking. When did sleep become the 8-hour, don't you dare disturb me block that we recognize today? The answer is, blame the 18th and 19th centuries. This is when artificial light barged into the story. First oil lamps, then gas lighting. And finally, Edison and his trusty light bulb. Suddenly, night wasn't dark anymore. People could work longer, play longer, argue about politics longer. Midnight became less of a mystical pause and more of just another time to get stuff done. And so, segmented sleep faded. No more first sleep and second sleep. Instead, people began aiming for a single, unbroken stretch. Doctors started declaring it the healthiest way. Manuals were written. Advice columns popped up. Sleep was moralized. Getting up in the middle of the night was suddenly suspicious. Like, oh, you woke up at 2 a.m.? Clearly you're doing something sinful. Once again, society took something flexible and turned it into a rigid standard, which feels very on-brand for the modern world. But even with this new sleep culture, not everyone adapted neatly. The Industrial Revolution didn't just standardize sleep, it also disrupted it. Factory workers had punishing schedules. Night shifts became common. The working poor often didn't have the luxury of an 8-hour block. Meanwhile, the wealthy classes turned sleep into a science experiment. They tracked hours. They tried new mattresses. They bought into early forms of what we'd now call sleep hygiene. By the Victorian era, sleep was wrapped up with morality, health, and class. If you got too much of it, you were lazy. If you got too little, you were reckless. And if you admitted to waking up at night, people looked at you funny. The once normal segmented sleep cycle was erased from collective memory, surviving only in scattered folklore and the occasional anthropologist's notes. And that, my friends, is how we slid into the modern obsession with perfect sleep. We took something natural, adaptable, and even kind of cozy, and turned it into yet another productivity metric, because of course we did. But don't worry, we're only just getting started. In the next stretch, we'll wander into the strange medical theories about sleep, the cures, the warnings, the bizarre treatments that people tried. Because history isn't history without at least one doctor prescribing something that sounds insane to us now. So, fluff your pillow. We're about to drift into even stranger dreamland.